To kick things off, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat today, jumping on this episode. Such a privilege and an honor to have you yourself, the Olympic champion, here on our episode. And it's been such a cool circle, I guess, of life, as gone from being in high school where I got to be a freshman, pretty much trying to follow your shadow. I remember running on the track with you for like the one time I got to train with you before officer regionals. And I just think about the time then when everyone knew, obviously, you're a great athlete. We expected you to go on to the next levels as you did. But for me, it was kind of like Coach Housen and Coach Consism were expecting me to kind of follow in your shoes. And I was like, man, that's some hard shoes to fill, right? Like you're jumping heights I jumped at senior when you're in a freshman. So I was like, I don't know if this is going to be exactly for me, but track and field transitioned over into so many other sports where it helped me be a better base runner. It worked on my quickness, my power, all the great things, right? So just looking forward to diving into your athletic journey, how the process went, the things that you worked on within your mindset, how you became mentally tougher, the things you implemented in your routine that helped you stay grounded, stay motivated, but as well, just stay positive and hungry to keep pursuing to the next, especially if you get to certain levels, you already get those achievements. So you're kind of like, what now? And obviously for Olympians, you have 4 years to then train for the next Olympics, which can be daunting on the mind to think of, am I doing enough? Do I want to continue doing this? And so forth. So first off, just appreciate you tuning in. And I'm really looking forward to hearing so much of your wisdom and expertise from your journey.
I'll do my best. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no worries, man. So to really kickstart it off, obviously you're coming from a little small town of Corunna. You went to a AAA high school, St. Pat's, where we don't even have a track anymore. The school doesn't exist. Obviously, it's transitioned to St. Chris. That's our enemy. But growing up in that environment, not really having that much competition, not coming from somewhere in the States where they're just breeding these athletes at a high level, what motivated you to get into track and field, but as well be passionate about high jumping and pursue that as your main event?
Yeah, like you said, I grew up in a very small town, but I was super fortunate. I have talked to a lot of other athletes about their experiences growing up, and I I don't think I took it for granted, but I don't think I realized the opportunities that I had at my elementary school. Even like we had very involved teachers and just like admin staff who really put in a lot of extra hours coaching. Our there We had one teacher at my elementary school who literally coached pretty much everything. He had like gone out into the parking lot and painted lanes on the little like loop around the school, and just really made sports fun. And were just really available for anyone, whether they wanted to be competitive, whether they wanted to have fun. And so from a really young age, like grade 2 or 3, I just exposed myself to whatever was available. So in elementary school, that meant like cross country, soccer, volleyball, basketball, and track and field. I think that was everything that was offered, and I tried everything, and then kind of just continued that into high school. And so for quite a while, I I remember thinking I wanted to be an athlete, but I wasn't like amazing at anything. I knew I liked everything, but was sort of like, okay, I want to be a professional athlete, and then I guess at some point I'll just figure out what sport that's going to be. And
Yeah.
that's kind of how it worked. I In high school, I continued to do a bunch of sports. Like a lot of athletes, I was really drawn to team sports just because you get to hang out with your friends, and you get to celebrate with your teammates. And if things don't go well, you have teammates to sort of rally around you and support you. But as I grew up and I kind of my body matured a bit, I like to say that high jump more chose me than I chose it. I By the time I finished high school, I was pretty much the size I am now, like 6'4", 6'5", pretty lanky, which is kind of a prototypical high jumper body. So
Yeah.
as I liked the team sports, and probably would have liked to have stuck in that avenue. Like I said, I think high jump and track and field kind of um, more chose me right off the bat, and then obviously I grew to love the unique aspects of the individual sport and track and field in general.
Nice, nice, and that makes sense too. Of course, growing up, we're trying to just go outside and we want to play. We're a part of that generation where we were outside more than we were inside. I didn't really get into video games till I was like closer to high school, maybe. We didn't have like a computer. I was on MSN for a little bit or something, but that was it, right? I was outside playing sports like yourself. And through that, you kind of figure out, okay, where do I fit into this whole niche of sports? Where do I want to pursue? And I think at a young age, we have to remind athletes to just play everything, to build the skills and work on it all and just have fun, because
Mhm.
then you will actually build the habits and the right techniques and whatever. You'll develop your muscles in the right way to then focus in on one sport down the road. Typically, like when you're 15, 16, is when you start kind of dialing in, narrowing that field of what do I exactly want to do. And being a professional athlete for myself, I had the same thing where I was thinking at a young age, like I want to play sports, I want to have fun, but I was kind of just enjoying the process and just making the best of it. Once I got to high school and people were starting to push me, I would say, a little bit in a direction to pursue something more, then I started thinking about results. Then I started thinking about, the scholarship and that. How about for yourself? Like, did you ever really focus on that for your mindset, or were you just kind of enjoying the whole process during high school?
I think I did a pretty good job, and like I said before, I was surrounded by some really supportive and really, I think people that made my sporting background a lot more enjoyable than others, just because of the way they approached it. So, like I said, I would do soccer for a few months, and then once soccer was done, I switched my focus, and now I'm playing hockey. And once that's done, I do
Yeah.
track and field. So there was just always something else to look forward to. And like you said, you also went to school in the States. I don't know if you noticed this the same way that I did. I think that's something that Canada, probably because we don't have the same, careful of how to say this, we don't have
I know where you're going with this.
we don't have the same kind of collegiate or university experience
Yeah.
where from such a young age it's driven into your head, I need to get a scholarship, so I need to focus on this. And we're just funneling, or they are just funneling kids from such a young age that oftentimes by the time they get to university they're just so burnt out. And I think
Mhm.
the way that it seems, or at least in the past, the Canadian system has gone, it's just do a bunch of sports and then we'll slowly funnel you down, so that basically you have to make the choice by the time you get to
Right.
university. A lot of Canadian kids are doing multiple sports through high school, and then they make that choice once they go to university if they decide to go on that route. So, which I think is a background that I really benefited from, and I think those are typically the types of athletes that we see have longevity and do well in the professional ranks.
I would absolutely agree. I ended up playing 2 years junior college in Texas, and then from the smaller school setting to the university level Division 1, I went to Southeastern Louisiana, and it's the same thing. I had a lot of teammates where they're so set in stone, they're so set in their ways because they only played baseball. Some of them played baseball and football. They were like two sport athletes or one sport, but they were so focused in from like 8 years old, where the level of performance and competition and training is way more advanced than we ever received at that age. And I don't think I even started training at that level until I was at least 16 when I went to like Team Ontario and Toronto and got that coaching and exposure. And
Yeah.
then once we ended up traveling to down south when I was that age, I started seeing these guys are like 6'4", they're like 200 pounds. I'm like, how are these guys so big? They're throwing 100 miles an hour kind of thing. And I'm 16. And it's just like your eyes definitely get opened up to the amount of competition out there and how difficult it is to reach the higher ranks. But as you said, there's a lot of people who burn out earlier or have injuries. I've had a lot of teammates, they all had Tommy John surgeries. They've all gone through something that happened because they just get so focused in. So that is a benefit of being here in Canada. Of course, we have a little bit, we're behind in the ball in our development at times, but I think it's improved a lot. I've
Mhm.
seen a big improvement on the baseball side for my field, but even just seeing how locally for our track and field, your sister coaching with the Sarnia Club, and yourself going through the process, I'm sure you've seen a lot more development and how they focus on the training, what goes into it, and then just getting exposure to the right competition so you're ready and confident to handle the Olympics or whatever comes your way as an athlete. So that's really cool. That's awesome. But definitely the States is ahead in performance and training, but there is always a repercussion to every pro, right? So that's an interesting thing. Now, as you kind of progressed into university, you made that transition into better competition. How did you handle the new environment, the adversity, the pressure being kind of on your own now, away from family, and as well pursuing kinesiology, that's a challenging degree to also do at the same time as athletics, to put that time into it. How did that experience kind of go for you?
Yeah, the transition or my transition into university, I think n- being naive, I think, can get you a long way. And that's kind of how I would describe at least my first year of school. Um, I remember having friends who weren't athletes, and they would often make comments like, I don't know how you guys do it, like how you train 20 hours a week on top of school. And I was like, I don't, this is just what I've always done. Like I used to wake up at 7:30 to catch the bus for high school and then stay after school for sports and wouldn't get home till 5. And this is just what my life has always been like. So I
Mhm.
think not taking that step back to sort of realize how busy things are and just keep your head down really benefited me a lot. But that was when I went to school. It was the first time that I have ever focused on one sport. It was the first time that I had ever really been in a weight room. And I was also a super late developer. Like when I went away to university, I still looked prepubescent, uh, which is I think, a recipe, at least for a male athlete, to show some pretty big gains by the time they get to university. I know my coaches in school would talk about how that's kind of the athlete that they would like to recruit, at least in a sport like track and field. That's typically a little bit later. You develop a little bit later, you peak a little bit later. So for me, it was just kind of a recipe for I'm very easily moldable. Let's see, as long as I buy into the program, which I very much did, I think we can have some pretty big gains. And so that's that's kind of what my experience was like. I At the start of the year, my coach would have us every athlete come in and sort of talk through what your goals are for the year, and um, I think had never really done that before, thought that I was coming up with some pretty lofty goals. And it just kind of seemed like every meet or every weekend I was having to reevaluate because things were just crossing off as quickly as I could write them down. Um, and then it wasn't until basically the end of the year that I kind of sat back and was like, whoa, that a lot happened this year. I think I blinked and missed half of it. But for me, it was just, yeah, being in a new environment and really buying into the program and trusting my coach and uh, just being surrounded by people who had very similar goals to me and the same sort of work ethic that at least in track and field at our high school, it wasn't a huge team, so it was tough to get that sort of training environment. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, if you had told me everything or like the growth I was going to see by the end of my freshman year, if you had told me that at the start of the year, I definitely wouldn't have believed you. I think that was a big shift for me. Going into my first year, I remember thinking like, I want to get a scholarship. That's kind of the goal. Not really thinking too much past that. And then by the end of my first year, it became a little bit more evident that maybe I could pursue an Olympic dream or hopefully professional. I don't even know if I was thinking professional track and field after that, but for sure, world championships or Olympics were on the horizon.
Yeah, nice, man. That's good. And honestly, from my perspective of watching you when I was a freshman in high school, you were always a very grounded person. You were confident, but you were like quiet confidence. You kept it within yourself. You weren't boisterous. You didn't get up and down with the roller coaster of emotions. And that is definitely probably a trait that you developed on your own and you had in your toolbox to always keep, as you said, your head down, maybe a little bit naive to the point and give you that perspective, but you're able to just keep the focus, buy into the program. Very important, right? That's why we pick the school we go to. It's you want to have the right coaches, you want to have the right philosophies, and buying into that so that everything works well. Everyone's on the same page. Because if not, it doesn't matter how great of an athlete you are and you're in the wrong program, it can just go the wrong way for you. It just seems like it doesn't work out. So it's very important to take those trips, go do your visits, make sure everyone's on the same page of wanting to see your development, but as well, you enjoy the environment, you see you're going to have success. And then for you, I mean, you were like, how many times were you an All American and you won so many Big Ten titles? And throughout your career in university, you just started checking off the boxes, as you said, setting new goals. Now, when you were going through that in university, did you have like a mental preparation, a routine? Did you do visualization? Did you meditate? Like, what was your routine like to keep yourself ready to perform?
I think the coaches at my school were, at least with me, very much under the mentality of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I think people were careful not to say too much or try to introduce too much into my program because things were working.
Hmm.
The first time that I had heard the the concept of visualization was in my third year of school. I ended up basically like destroying every ligament in my foot.
Yes, I heard about that.
So knew I had surgery, knew I was going to have to sit out for 12 months. And the head coach, he wasn't even my high jump coach, he was a distance coach. Um, I think he asked me to come into his office and sort of asked me like, okay, so what's the plan? The Olympics are next year. Like, how are you going to keep yourself sane first and foremost, and make sure that when you come back you're just as good as when you left. And so he introduced the concept of visualization to me. And I think I sort of like haphazardly like took the advice, and maybe for the first few weeks really tried to utilize it, but I didn't have anyone who I think really showed me the ropes. It was kind of like, have you heard of this? Do some research on your own, I guess, if you want to.
Yeah.
Um, we had we had a sports psychologist at the university. Um, as far as I know, it was one practitioner for the entire athletic department
Hmm.
because I went to school in the late I started school in 2008, and so at that time mental health and specifically in track and field was definitely not in the same place that it is today. And so I knew a few athletes on my team who would see the sports psychologist, but it was still very much in the era of if you're seeing a sports psychologist, it's because there's something wrong. You've got
Yeah.
the yips, or there's some sort of issue. So there was definitely a stigma, and I would say at the time I very much bought into that, where I didn't want to have to see the sports psychologist. I thought felt everything was fine. I didn't need to. Um, when I did recover from the injury and start jumping again, I I do wish that I had utilized visualization a little bit more, or had done some more um, mental work just to sort of stay in the game. Um, Things ultimately turned out all right, but as an older athlete, I for sure would have told myself to take this a little bit more seriously. And when I did get into the professional ranks, I ultimately did start working with a sports psych, but it was tough to get over the stigma, or like those the comments that you hear in the locker room about so and so having to see the sports psychologist. So it was definitely a bullet that I had to bite in finally pursuing that. I wish that I had done it years earlier, and
Sure. Yeah.
glad that athletes are starting to appreciate that a little bit more. It's obviously 10, 15 years down the road, but it's great to see that that stigma is lifting, at least in part.
Yeah, and it does take a few like key big athletes to kind of make that push. You know, we saw the Michael Phelps, we saw the Gabby Douglas, just a few names, obviously, but they really kind of were that push to let people know, hey, we're humans too. We're dealing with all these things. We're pushing ourselves to perform. We're pushing our physical body, mental, emotional, in all these directions, and we're riding this roller coaster at times. And also, people think we're a little bit superhuman, where we're not supposed to show that weakness. Same thing for me playing baseball, there was not this sense that you wanted to have anyone know you need to go talk to someone about your mental health or your mental wellness, right? You just develop mental toughness. And even on our binder we got from our coach with all our plays in it, on the very back said FIO. So if you didn't know anything, figure it out. And that was the philosophy, right? And it was more just you got mentally tougher by handling a challenge and pushing through it. And after you'll become tougher, right? And doing things in order to keep yourself more present, calm, and relaxed were almost just like whatever you felt worked for you. There was no sense of doing breath work. There was no meditation. There was none of those things really until down the road, more people started realizing this is important. This is affecting performance. And this is also what's hindering people with a lot of talent from taking it to the highest level for their potential because they're no longer maximizing the opportunities because their mind's somewhere else. They're worried, they're anxious, and you can't perform. You can't do the things to your best of ability if you have those nerves kicking in, if you're feeling anxious, or you just have doubts that start creeping in, right? So doing the affirmations and doing all those positive things really does change our mindset and then allows us to feel a lot more grateful. We start changing the mindset towards how we're waking up, how we're approaching the day. We're doing the little things, going for a walk in nature, reading a book and just sitting outside enjoying the sounds. We didn't really understand those things because it wasn't seen as anything necessary. You're just either you do it, you work hard, you get better, and you perform. That's it. Be tough,
Right.
figure it out. Um, that's a real interesting thing because it was such the exact same road that I took, and from not really getting the guidance and help with my injury, it did start playing with my mind because I was able to kind of rehab but still play. So I'm dealing with feeling the aches, feeling the pain. Some days it feels great, some days it feels terrible. So I'm like, do I throw it this hard? Can I hit today? And I start second guessing myself to where the opportunities that I needed to seize, I probably didn't seize all of them. I was fortunate enough to still get drafted and play professional, but I probably could have took my talents and my skills to the highest level, right? I have friends now that are big leaguers, people who are in different levels of sport that have made it to the elite levels. And really all it was is I just wasn't trusting myself yet. I didn't truly have that full inner confidence because of that second guessing nature. So developing that mental resilience through certain practices now, we're able to help the athletes just start getting ahead on the ball from a younger age. So they're building the right habits, they're getting the routine down so that when it really does get challenging, when you're on your own, you know what to resort back to. You know what the tools are to use in order to make the most of the situation and just be present, be here. So what? Whatever happens, cool, move on. But it's hard to think like that, right? It's hard when we were going through those steps. Many athletes don't have that coaching. So it's nice to see we're transitioning and sports are always evolving. Coaching's always getting better. And we as athletes are now sharing to other athletes that are younger to be like, hey, this is what we went through. This is how it's going to be better for you. So thank you for sharing that for sure. And with your injury, now sitting there for kind of 12 months, not really doing anything, did that affect you mentally to not, be doing anything, to not be a part of the team, just kind of sit there and wait?
Well, the nice thing about my university program, so I think there were a lot of things that worked out really well in my favor. I My injury was at the very beginning of the outdoor season,
Mm,
so I knew I was going to have to redshirt an outdoor season and then the following indoor season. Whereas if you redshirt a full calendar year, you're really sitting out for like 18 months.
mm,
Whereas I only had 12 months. So right off the bat, I knew,
that's a
okay,
positive.
that's one positive.
Mm,
The second thing is we had a really beautiful indoor facility. And so I knew our team was home pretty much all indoor season.
that's sweet.
Whereas when it got tough for me was that when everyone was away. So like
Right.
every weekend, sometimes on like Wednesday, they're leaving and they're going to all these beautiful locations to compete, and I'm just stuck at home. And
Yeah.
so I really only had to deal with that for a few months. But again, I think like just being a naive and like probably overconfident. I like to say that as an athlete, I was like, I'm sure everybody thinks this, but was like the perfect amount of cocky where I had was told right off the bat, like, okay, this injury, this ends a lot of athletes' careers, and a lot of athletes who it has ended their career don't jump off that one foot and put as much force into their foot as you do. So
Mhm.
we really have no other high jumper or no other comparison that you can look to see like, oh, see, he did it or she came back from this. And I just my doctor, who was a very renowned doctor in the States, had done this surgery on a lot of athletes, straight up told me that, like, this is a potentially career ending injury. And I just kind of said, okay, well, I don't think that's going to be the case for me, but I appreciate it. And so I don't think I ever really dwelled on that very real possibility,
Mhm.
which again, in the long run, I think really benefited for me. But the other thing that I think my program did very well for me or supported me through is I was used to training like 20 hours a week. And when I got injured, I wasn't able to train through it at all. I was on crutches in a boot for like 3 or 4 months. Um, so I just basically completely replaced the 20 hours that I was doing training every week with like 20 hours of rehab and recovery and stuff like that. So just like a complete replacement. So I was still around the team a lot. I was still around the trainers. And when we had meets, I was obviously still around for that. So um, I just, did my best to not isolate myself and to still kind of stay as involved with the team as I could given the circumstances.
That's awesome. And it's great that you had such a positive mindset towards that whole circumstance. Being able to hear someone tell you, like, this might end your career with this, and potentially you're never going to do this again, and be like, okay, that's
But
huge on you. And to look at something as well, like, well, I could be out for 18 months, but I'm only out for 12. Not many athletes can think like that. So, as I said, you already had some skills and traits that gave you that grit and kind of tenacity to just push through adversity, no matter what happened. So, definitely that probably helped you along the way that you didn't just feel sorry for yourself. You took the time, you said, hey, I can't compete for 20 hours and train. I'm going to put that into my rehab and put it into still getting myself to develop and move forward. And you're not just sitting there waiting, kind of twiddling your thumbs, hoping that, once the day comes, okay, now all of a sudden jump back into it. Now, when you're going through university, did you do anything with Team Canada at that time through that process?
my first year of school, I was still like a youth junior athlete,
Mhm.
and so I did a couple of competitions uh, as a junior while I was still a
Right.
freshman at school, and then um, in track and field, like every 4 years, we have a bit of a down year, and so basically the middle of my university career, between that down year and then my injury, I really kind of fell off the face of the earth for as far as Athletics Canada is concerned. And then I didn't really join the team again until the Olympics in 2012. And
Okay.
so I, from my perspective, I think I benefited from kind of coming from outside the radar, sort of coming up and sort of joining that team. Nobody really knew who I was. I wasn't in Canada. I had just sat out a year injured, and so I was able to, sort of sneak onto that Olympic team with no expectations, and no one really knew my name, even the other athletes on the team. And well, that maybe could have been tough for some people. I really consider that a blessing for me. The way that I compete, the kind of personality that I have, it was great.
No, that's awesome. And throughout, I could reiterate, you have such a positive mindset. No matter where you go, you always found the ways to look at it with the right look towards the perspective and the situation to just handle it as like, okay, well, I actually don't have that much expectations. I'm here just to make the best of this opportunity. You don't really have to know my name, but I'm gonna do it for me, and that's what I'm doing this for. And of course, everyone that's helped you along the journey, right? Now, you had a few meets before the actual Olympics, right? You had a few just before in London, England. Is that what I saw?
I Right after they announced our team name, or like the Olympic team, I got into the London Diamond League.
Yeah.
And then so I basically flew right over beforehand. Did a couple of Diamond League meets before heading into the village, and so that was really my first like foray into professional track and field. And it was really just, you don't have a name until you have a name, and in track and
Yeah.
field, that name is qualifying for the Olympics.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, what would you say is the biggest, I guess, adjustment you have to make in order to go from university to that diamond elite level
Um, so in university, one, you've always got your support team around you. Your teammates are there. A lot of times, those are your roommates, your best friends. You've got your coaches, even if it's not just your specific event coach who may be helping 10 other athletes. There's
now?
people there that you're comfortable with. And that's very much not the case, especially when you're first joining like the Diamond League, the professional circuit. Oftentimes, you're sent over by yourself. You're buying your own ticket over. You're probably rooming with someone you've never met before, and very often you don't have a coach. So
Yeah.
you learn quickly. It's kind of like getting thrown in the deep end and learning how to swim. And that was my experience. When I went over for my first meet, I had my high school coach come with me who is a like very overqualified high school coach. So I was very fortunate for that. But then I got into another Diamond League meet after that one went well, and he had to go home. And so for a week, I was just in Europe on my own, trying to figure things out. And then went into my first like real major Diamond League totally by myself. On my own, really like no access to a track, no access to a gym for quite a while. And like you said, you just make these things work. And hopefully it's not at like your major championship that you have to try to figure out how to make it work. You try to do these things, you learn from your mistakes at your regional meets or like exhibition games and things like that. And so I was able to do that. I remember thinking like, okay, I'm excited for this. I don't feel super prepared. I don't want this to be the case in the Olympics, obviously, but this is going to be a learning experience for me. And that's. I think for me, I went into it with that expectation. This is my first time meeting these guys that I'm going to be competing against in London. I've been in a very like sequestered North American season for the last 4 years. So this is my first time meeting these guys, kind of introducing myself. And I'm glad I had that opportunity, obviously, before the Olympics, because it could have been a really daunting experience walking out into the stadium without at least a little bit of professional experience under my belt.
Yeah, definitely. Now, transitioning to the first Olympics you went to, how did that feel walking to that stadium, being a part of now representing your country, seeing all these great athletes, seeing all these people who are going to be, cheering, booing, whatever it may be? What were the emotions like and the nerves, and how did you handle that? And then just try to channel it into the right direction.
Um, I So I know how my mind works, and I think I was fortunate enough to sort of figure this out as a young athlete. That I like to tell myself that I'm an underdog. At the Olympics, I very much was, so that was easy in that scenario. But because high jump, it takes so long to warm up. It's not like a race where you walk out under the tunnel and the stadium's already full and you're in the blocks, 30
Mhm.
seconds later. For us, we come out at basically we're the first people out on the track, so the stadium's not very full. So when I had that moment where I'm walking out of the tunnel and sort of looking around, there's a lot of empty seats. And so it like slowly filled up as we were finishing up our warm up. And we're jumping. And when I'm standing there, the stadium is at my back. So
Okay.
sometimes you can really, if you need to, which is I'm that type of athlete, just kind of ignore the fact that they're there.
Yeah.
And it kind of did get really loud, and it was difficult to, sort of shut your mind off or close your ears to that. Uh, I reminded myself that I was like, the men's 100 is going on in like 15 minutes. Everyone is here to watch Usain Bolt. Nobody is watching you. So just do whatever. It doesn't matter how this goes. And so I think I was really able to disassociate
Yeah.
in the moment.
Yeah, and you were super present, right? Like you've always been a pretty present person, you would say. You wouldn't feel like your mind's like so far ahead or you're dwelling on the past, especially in high jump. Like you hit the bar, okay, so what? Hopefully you get another attempt. But to be able to be very present, to be able to tune it out. I know you're a gum chewer. I'm a gum chewer too. So it's something that just kind of keeps our mind going so we can focus on that and just let the instincts kick in, let the practice and the work you've put in just shine and do the best you can. As you said, if you're an underdog, you don't have this expectation that I have to come out and be number one. No one really knows me. I'm just gonna do the best I can. And whatever experience I get from this, then we're gonna run with it. Going through, you're in your first Olympics, you're dealing with the emotions, the crowd, the nerves. How is that for you, the way that you were able to keep your head down, stay focused, and enjoy that process and just make the most of that experience?
Yeah, I think anytime that I was sort of confronted with a new challenge, and obviously, your first Olympic Games is a very big new challenge, I was kind of experimenting with ways that I like things I could tell myself, things that I could do in the lead up to really just keep myself in my like optimal anxiety, stress zone. And so I knew that I liked competing as an underdog. I knew that I liked people not really knowing my name, so that you could come out and surprise. And if things don't go well, no one was really expecting you to do anything anyway. And so going into the Olympics, that was really what I was trying to tell myself. But it's tough when you're walking out into a stadium of 80,000 people. But the high jump has the unique experience of, because we warm up for so long, you're walking out into a pretty empty stadium, and so I was able to walk out, sort of take in the environment, but the seats are pretty empty and they're slowly filling up as we're warming up. So I never had that like overwhelming feeling of walking out into a roaring stadium the way that like a sprinter does, who walks out and goes right to their blocks and they have to race 30 seconds later.
Yeah.
So for us, it was a little bit more of like a diluted experience, which I think really benefited me. There's definitely showmen in the high jump that I think would have benefited from that sort of sprinter experience. But for me, it was nice to sort of take things slowly, and then when things did get really overwhelming and you could hear the roars from the crowd, it was easy for me to say like, they're not watching you, they're watching Usain Bolt. The men's 100 is in 10 minutes.
Yeah, yeah.
So for me, I that was what I needed to tell myself. I'm sure there were lots of athletes that were like, "Oh my God, everyone's cheering for me," when in reality they were cheering for Usain Bolt. But hey, tell yourself whatever you got to tell yourself to get yourself in the right mindset to take that jump. And for me, it was sort of minimizing the moment, so that I could just focus on the things that I needed to focus on.
Yeah, that's unreal. And many athletes get overwhelmed by the amount of people watching, understanding the president's behind the Olympics and this opportunity, and I need to seize it right now and perform. And once you start getting into that environment, you don't really know how you're going to respond until you're faced with the challenge. And for you, having that nice balance of understanding how to keep your anxiety in check, kind of having that level of cockiness and confidence where it's quiet confidence. You're not flaunting it towards people, but you're keeping that happy medium. It's definitely a very important tool to be able to then go out there and just be like, I'm just here to jump. You just throw a stick of gum in, you start chewing, you keep your mind a little more focused, and whatever's going to happen is going to happen because I'm sure along the way, majority of the guys you were jumping against, you've already competed with throughout the few times you were at some Diamond Elite events beforehand, kind of knew what you were going into. Now it's just a matter of like, well, everyone's watching this, right? Now, from that experience, did you make any adjustments or really pivotal moments to then transition into the next set of the year for the Elite League or for Commonwealth or preparing for the next Olympics?
I mean, I definitely took the experiences that I learned at those Olympics, along with me. I I keep saying like I think I was a good amount of cocky, uh, whereas I don't ever remember going into a competition and thinking I don't belong. Like I always told myself,
Very important. Yeah.
you belong here. Like you deserve to be here just as much as everybody else. Which, like you said, I think is very important, but not always easy to feel that way. Um, and so in terms of like my preparation, we didn't change too much. Obviously, things were going well, and actually, I was fortunate enough at the end of those Olympics, I went back and had a final year of school, so it was very easy for me to just like fall right back into my routine, a routine that was working, leading into the next season. But the one thing that I knew and I learned quickly in my career, I'd say in my first year as a pro, was that yeah, as much as you want to do well at every meet, it's not sustainable to make every Diamond League meet and every um, obviously the Olympics and like national championships and things like that are important. And those are probably the things that you need to put your focus on. Because my first year as a pro, I was excited and really building myself up for every Diamond League meet, and was devastated when they didn't go exactly as I wanted them to. And so by the end of that season, I was totally burnt out. Remember thinking like, this is not sustainable. We have to make some adjustment to this. And so it wasn't right after the Olympics. It was, I would say, after my first year of professional, which was the following year, that's where I really sat down with my coach and we made some adjustments like that. And the adjustments were simple. Like, do you want to win the London Diamond League, or do you want to win the World Championships at the end of the summer? And obviously the answer was always simple. I want to win World Championships. And he's like, okay, well then we're going to have to train through those, and or you're going to have to be okay with losing some of these meets. And so that's what we did. We basically just used the skills that we learned in the NCAA, where you have to peak for an indoor championship and an outdoor championship. 2 peaks per year. It's easy to manage. And so we would pick 2 competitions in the summer and say, not that we're forgetting everything else, but like we want to win worlds and you want to win the national championships, or you want to win whatever indoor meet. And so like anything, you take the experiences that you have early on, you see what works, what doesn't work. That was obviously working very well in the NCAA for me. And so felt like these are the things we don't need to change. There's obviously going to be things along the way that we do need to change, but ultimately, let's keep things simple and stick to what works.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, how would you say you kept your balance between life and training and sport and being this high jumper who's always on the pursuit to that next meet, next event, whatever the big one is on the calendar? How'd you keep that balance in your life to just also be a normal person, go out for a cupcake or go to the beach, right? How did you keep that balance?
Yeah, I think when growing up, when you think about athletes, all you see is like their post game interview, or the post race at the Olympics, things like that. And when we were young athletes, social media was not the monster that it is today.
Mhm.
And so, not that anyone is really showing their genuine true life on social media, but I think we get a better taste of it now. Whereas for us, when we were first, sort of climbing the ranks, all that I heard was like, you're an athlete 24/7, and all your whole life is about like recovery and competing and getting ready for the next workout. Whereas I never really identified with that. Um, I remember hearing athletes say like, "Oh, I'm like now that the Olympics are done, I'm going to have a cupcake," like you said, and I was like,
Yeah.
"Are other athletes not eating cupcakes? Like, I'm not taking this seriously enough." And I think I pretty quickly realized like, you've got to have balance. This can't be my entire identity. I've got to have other
Yeah.
things in my life. And so I would obviously put the work in. Like I was very, very dedicated to my craft. I'd show up every day at practice. I would make sure I was getting the recovery in. But when practice was done, I didn't think about track when I went home. And if I was on training camps, that meant like I'm gonna go sightsee. I'm gonna go to the beach. I'm gonna do these other things that make me happy, because my entire life can't be track. Because you never know what's going to happen tomorrow. At any point in time, this can be taken away from you, and you need to have balance, and you need to be happy with who you are off the track, and what you've got going on off the track. And so I think I did a pretty good job of that. That I was able to realize like, okay, if this doesn't go well, your life's not over. You've still got
Yeah.
things going on. There's going to be other meets. Um, there's going to be other competitions. There's going to be other things to do, and which I think is something that is tough for younger athletes who are watching professionals realize that. I hope that goes on in more professional athletes' minds than they let on. I think a lot
Yeah.
of athletes are not so quick to acknowledge that or admit that, my whole life doesn't revolve around this the way that I
Yeah.
think you want it to, or you expect it to.
Yeah, you had a great mindset going through that process, right? You just naturally did mindfulness techniques along the way of going out for some fresh air, going to the beach, reading a book, going to have that cupcake, doing the things that make your life happy, joyful. That is a very important part of who we are as athletes, but just human beings. If we're not happy with our overall life, it doesn't matter how much we compete, we're never going to really be enjoying that. So we're not even making the most of the experience. And then why are we putting all this work and effort into this craft if we're not even really enjoying it?
Right.
Right. So it is important, as you said, for younger athletes to they see the examples of the pros, and they see it as like it takes consistent effort, consistent dedication. Every day you're focused towards this. There's always something to do. And I had that mindset growing up. I would come home from practice and I would start watching swings, or I would start analyzing some video I had. And it was like a never ending process. And definitely it leads to burnout.
Right.
And it just, you lose the passion along the way because too much of anything is good for nothing. So
Right.
we as athletes got to keep that balance, got to find ways that keep us feeling joyful. A normal human being that doesn't always have to identify as this specific athlete or sport, because you're more than just Derek Drouin, high jumper. You're Derek Drouin, right? And that is what people should know you as. And fortunate enough for you, you were able to have the right mindset and process towards the exposure, the experience, all the adversity, the challenges, but also the expectations that are getting put on you. The people around you who have been supporting you your whole life, who you also want to perform for as well, to show that, like, hey, this was worth it. All this time and effort is paying off.
Mhm.
So now you're going through your first experience with the Olympics, and you have to kind of take some losses here and there as you're going through. Then you have the 2015 World Championships. Along the way, you had some wins. Yeah, did you have like any like Commonwealth game wins, or did you pretty much just not really have anything until that 2015 season?
No, I had a Commonwealth Games, which was my first Commonwealth Games. It was as a Canadian athlete. I'm not. I feel that the other Commonwealth countries probably consider it at the same sort of level, but that's really like one step down from the Olympics for us.
Yeah,
It's very competitive. I know it's different in other sports, but for track and field, it's a very competitive meet, and it's really like pretty widely considered a stepping stone to the Olympics, in the way that you're in an Olympic or you're in a village the same way you are in the Olympics. There's all of these other athletes playing all these other sports. There's a lot going on, and so it's a great learning experience for athletes who ultimately want to qualify for the Olympics. And so it's also a great place to figure out what works for you, what you want to do at the Olympics, and what you don't want to do at the Olympics 2 years from now. And so I had that experience at Commonwealth Games. And then similarly, the next year we have Pan Am Games, which is, just North and South America. But it's a really similar atmosphere where you're in a village. You've got the same sort of like chaos going on, and you learn how to navigate those distractions and the lead up in the same way that you would hopefully at the Olympics the following year.
yeah, yeah. Now, all these great experiences you're having on the way, you're becoming mentally resilient. You're just naturally developing it because you're going into these challenges and you're making the best of it. And each time, it's kind of putting a chip on your shoulder to become a little bit stronger, a little bit more confident, and a little bit more believing in yourself. How did you feel walking into your second Olympics after all these experiences? Now,
I remember for like my World Championships in 2015, and then a little bit, I would say a less extent in the 2016 Olympics. But at that point, leading up to that point, I had always told myself like, no one expects you to win. Everyone's watching Barshim or everybody's watching Bondarenko. I remember in 2015, even as I told myself that, I was like, no one believes that, and also you don't believe that. Like, if there was ever a World Championships for you to win, this is it.
hmm.
And so that mentality was pretty similar to the one that I had going into Rio. And so luckily, I had the experience from the year before where I tried to tell myself that and was like, nobody's believing this, even you're not believing this. So we got to figure out something else that's going to work. And so heading into Rio, I was the defending world champ. My last meet heading in was really strong. I don't know that I was the world leader, but I was definitely one of the favorites, and so that was a different experience for me. Um, but I looked back at the things that I told myself heading into London, where it's like, you're already an Olympian. No one can take that away from you. And so for me, it was like, okay, you're already an Olympic medalist from London. Nobody can take that away from you. If you win today, amazing. Obviously,
Yeah,
that's the goal. But like, if you told 10-year-old Derek, like, you're going to be an Olympic medalist one day, he would have thought it was the coolest thing in the world. So if you don't win these Olympics, that's not how you're going to be remembered. And so I think it was just working through telling yourself whatever you need to tell yourself, to get yourself in that right mindset. And for me, it was I needed a little bit of anxiety for sure. I didn't want too much of it, and so just figuring out what you need to tell yourself, and so going into Rio, where I knew I was one of the favorites, it was kind of a series of like, you can do this. Like this is the door is open for you. Go ready to take it. But if you don't, it's fine. You know, like this
Yeah.
isn't going to be. And so just kind of like keeping a balance between between those two comments.
Unreal
Whatever.
mindset. Yeah, absolutely unreal mindset. It definitely is a contest to why you had success because you were doing the right things. You found out how to have that internal language that was still positive, that was still focusing on not making it bigger than it needs to be. You were finding ways to just not add the pressure because there's already pressure, right? You're there and doing all this work to compete to try and win. But as you said, that's not what necessarily you're going to be remembered for. There's so many other things. There's always something to be thankful and grateful for, right? Every time. So if you have that mindset towards anything, you'll look at it with more of an open mind. You'll see the opportunity as you get to do this, not that like I have to do this. Oh, what if this happens, right? Well, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. That's based on the time and effort you put in. So going into that final, when you're in that Olympics, do you have any like breathing techniques you do? Do you just chew more gum? Like, what do you talk yourself through, and what's your mindset in that moment before you were going to make those jumps?
I I wouldn't have called myself like a superstitious athlete, but I know the things that worked for me. I knew the things that made me feel like I wasn't a coffee drinker, but like I knew how to get myself worked up as if I had just had caffeine,
Yeah,
uh, or things like that. And so I did have um, some sort of like breathing techniques right before I would jump. It was more like um, kind of like a hyperventilation, maybe like a few minutes beforehand. Um, and then obviously like my pre-jump routine just to like hit right positions, things like that. And so there, I was fairly well known for having a pretty long pre-jump routine.
hmm
So I wasn't like I was cognizant of like taking people's time. So I would start it like long before it was actually my turn to jump, so that when my name was actually called, I was pretty ready to go. But yeah, I just over time figured out things that worked for me. I would obviously test things out in smaller competitions and in practice to a certain extent, so that by the time you get to those big championships, you know what works. And I think the thing that people maybe putting too much emphasis on is like trying to get yourself worked up. For
yeah.
me, it's the Olympics. You're not going to need to try to get yourself worked up. What you're
Calm
going to
down.
need to do is try to get yourself like to your right level. And
Yeah,
so for me, that was um, more of what like the breathing techniques were for. You know,
yeah,
not that I ever had like super high highs or low lows,
yep.
but I like I've said a few times, like I knew what my optimal levels were, and I had breathing techniques, and I had sort of just little like whether I'm doing high skips or things like that to bring it up, or breathing to bring it down, based on what I needed in that moment.
Yeah, and you were really in tune with yourself, right?
Yeah,
You
and
understood.
trial and error at practice is
Yeah, and that's a key thing is letting young athletes know, stay adaptable.
right.
Be open to trying new things. It might feel awkward, it might not feel the right thing, but it might help you down the road and be something that becomes a strength when you need it in certain key moments. And that's a really good thing that you had the ability to kind of get yourself up, but also how to calm yourself down. Because when you do have those few last jumps, and I believe you jumped 240 for that one, or did you jump 239? What was that jump in 2016?
I jumped 238 in the Olympics.
238. Right. And then what it was is the other guy tried to jump 240 on his third attempt. The one
I took
athlete, he was from Ukraine.
Yeah, I took one attempt at 240 in the
Okay.
Olympics.
Yeah, okay. But you have jumped 240.
I have, yeah.
I have. Yeah, I remember that. And the world record's 245.
Right.
So close. That's amazing though. Like, yeah, I know. It's crazy to think. And for anyone to put into perspective, being what, you're 6'5"? You know, there's still so much above that to go, and it's amazing to see you guys take yourself and propel. And you're such a smooth jumper. You know what I mean? I was the type of person I was like I always appreciated that bounding start that you always kind of had. I learned that from you, I think, and being at St. Pat's watching you. And then it was kind of like a boom, 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 take off. But I always had the issue with my butt hitting the bar at higher heights because I was built a little bit more there,
I
thanks
don't
to
have
my
that problem.
parents. Yeah, so I see it with the high jumpers. The build of the body types is a lot lanky, flatter back, and just amazing flexibility through the spine and stuff. And it was such a cool moment to watch when you won, because to see you go over the bar, have a little bit of a tremor, and then you land and to just be like, absolutely, I did this. I think there were so many people who were felt like they jumped over the bar with you, from that whole process. And I know for my journey, a lot of times when I was kind of transitioning out of high school into university, you were just kind of getting in through the 2012 Olympics, and then down the road, as I was finishing university, I'd always bring up your name and be like, "Yeah, Derek Drouin. I used to train with that guy. I used to be his shadow, kind of. I had like a few times I got to run on the track with them because obviously you were running hurdles at the time, which is why I got to run with you. You were always doing your own thing at high jump because no one was ever even near your heights in high school. So um, it's funny how full circle comes back around and the experiences we have. But then, you get over that bar, you make the jump, you realize, okay, this just happened. You selly. What was your feelings? Because now you have to kind of wait for
Yeah.
a couple of the other jumpers to go. How did that feel to sit there and wait? Did time all of a sudden stand still?
That's the thing about high jump. Obviously, I love the event, but it's not the same as a race where, like, when you cross the finish line, you know that you won.
Yeah.
For me, people see like the recap or they watch the highlights, and so they see me jumping that bar, throwing my hands up, and they think that that's when I realize that I won, and it's not.
No.
A lot of times you have to sit and wait for your competitors to miss. And that was the case for me in Rio. I had to watch a competitor, and when he missed, that's when I knew that I won. So it's a little bit anticlimactic. It's not the way that people imagine it, but that's the name of the game. And um, I I remember clearing that height and celebrating, not because I thought, okay, that's it. I'm sure I just won with that, but I just felt so confident. Things were going so smoothly that I was like, it honestly doesn't matter to me if he makes this next bar. I'm confident I'm going to make one more. I think I
Yeah.
can beat anybody today by a full bar if I need to. And so that comes from like I know how I feel. I know that I'm a championship performer in a way that I not a ton of my competitors were at the time. And also like I obviously want to win, but I'm so happy with how I'm competing. I'm so happy with the lead up that I've had that if I lose, like I used to always say going into a competition, my goal is to clear every bar on the first attempt, to jump as high as I can, and just make it really difficult to beat me. And if
Mhm.
someone beats me, kudos to you. You earned it, but I'm going to make it as hard as possible. And so I felt like that's what I did that day. And who knows, the Bondarenko, the Ukrainian that you're referring to, had made that bar. I had watched him make that bar a number of times. I
Mm.
knew he was capable of doing it, and if he did it, you earned it. But all I could do was make it as difficult as possible for him or for anybody to beat me. And so I was going to be able to walk away and say, like, listen, I did everything that I could in all sports. As much as people don't like to admit it, you got to have luck on your side. And I did on that day. I also put in as much work as I possibly could and did everything I could. But I also had a little bit of luck on my side. There were at least two guys in that competition who were capable of jumping higher than they did that day. And if I had, we would be having a different conversation. But luck was on my side, but I also did, everything that I needed to and could have done.
Yeah, well, they always say preparation meets opportunity, and that's what we call luck, right? So you did the right things, you had the opportunity, and some things happened with some of your competitors that day they just didn't have exactly the most that they could jump. They didn't reach their peak, and it worked out on your behalf. But then you had the alignment of the years of work, of the mindset going in, seeing it as like, hey, I'm just going to control what I can control, make the best of the situation, and what's to be will be. And there's a few variables, there's all these pieces of the puzzle that come together to create that result. a lot of people who have helped you along the way, but as well, just your drive and tenacity to just keep pushing and move forward. Now you get this gold medal, you reach that peak. How did you feel after? Did you feel like, oh, I'm motivated to go win another gold in 2020? And of course, eventually into COVID, that's a whole nother story. But what was your motivation after to stay driven, to keep pursuing it? Because at that point, how old were you when you won a gold medal?
26.
Okay, so you're pretty much prime time, and you're thinking like, okay, I'm going to be 30 then by the time I go to the next one. This is going to be most of my peak really as an athlete at that level. So how did you stay motivated, and did you have to change anything in your routine, or did you again just keep rolling with the same system?
Well, so a few different answers to that. I remember in London, someone asking me like, "How do you feel?" And obviously, I was like, "I feel ecstatic." I wasn't expecting even necessarily to make the final, and I walked away with the medal. And I don't know. This seems like a much more like anecdotal retelling than an actual study, but whoever was interviewing me said like, "Oh, I read a study that bronze medalists are typically like the happiest medalists,"
Hmm.
which I remember kind of like cocking my head at. And he said, because like silver medalists are usually like, "Oh, I was this close, like I could have won," and gold medalists more often than not were expected to win, and so they're really more relieved than they are happy. Whereas
Hmm.
like bronze medalists are like, "I'm
Happy
happy
to
to
be
be
here.
here. Yeah, I can." And so like right off the bat, I would say that's how I felt after Rio. Like I wanted to win. I expected to win. And so when it finally happened, I was like, thank God it's over. I
Yeah,
won.
yeah.
Uh, I did though know that in order to keep this up for 4 more years, things are going to have to change. Like I always like right up to the end of my career, I liked practicing. Um, as my career progressed and it became like every meet I went to, it was, and the defending world champion or the defending Olympic champion, that starts to wear on you. And so I knew that like something was going to have to change in competing. And so at that point, I had made the decision with my coach to sort of get back to my roots in the sport, which was decathlon, just so I could,
Hmm.
spread myself a little bit and be able to go into competitions where it's like, I have a chance to PB today because I'm running hurdles. Whereas like it's really
Yeah.
tough to PB and high jump when, that's all you do and you've already, reached such a high level.
Mhm.
And so we did make that decision after the 2016 Olympics. Obviously, in Tokyo, the goal is still going to be to high jump, but like we need to add some variety into this.
Yeah.
And the one mistake we've talked a little bit about like setting goals and being able to readjust. The one mistake that I think I made in my career, I made a lot of mistakes. One that really sticks out to me is when I was in university, and you've alluded to this a few times, like I never really had big shows of emotion. I was never super high, super low. And that's um, in a lot of ways like a rarity in track and field. And listen, I love to watch someone get super excited. When I watch people compete like me, I'm like, I don't really like that. I want to see you get excited. And so I had a teammate in university ask me, like, what is it going to take for you to celebrate after you clear a bar? And I sort of like offhandedly said, if I ever jump 240, I'll celebrate. Because at the time I was like, no one jumps 240. I like this is a goal that I'm never, or this is something that I'm never actually going to have to like live up to or like.
Yeah.
And so when I had pretty early on established like this is my long term goal. My long term goal is to jump 240, and that's that lofty goal that's not going to happen. And in the meantime, I'll keep for like slowly progressing, like set a 3 centimeter goal here, 4 centimeters there, and then I jumped 240 pretty early in my career, and so I didn't know where to go from
Yeah.
I was pretty realistic with myself that I was like, I don't think I'm capable of jumping the world record. Like, I know it's only 5 more centimeters, but like 5 centimeters is a lot. And
It
I
is. It
and I
is.
was
Yeah.
pretty realistic with myself. Like, I don't think that's a realistic goal. I I said, like that's the new goal because that's what you say. Um, but I don't think I ever really thought that that was possible. And so I think when I jumped 240, because I had set that as my like lifetime goal, I didn't really know where to go from there. And that was not that that was like saying that was the beginning of the end is kind of like doomsday. Um, I, I jumped 240 and I won the Olympics pretty early on. And so for me, I think that was a mistake that I made, saying
Hmm.
like making my goals not lofty enough. That
Yeah.
I had crossed those two off, I didn't really know what to do at that point. I didn't really know where to go, and ultimately, I didn't have much success after that.
Interesting. Yeah. And, from there on, I guess, is just goal setting. Such an important thing now we realize to keep setting that next goal.
Yeah,
Even how lofty it may be, well, set the next one, right? And keep pushing yourself to get the most out of yourself in order to see where you're going to take it. If you could win another gold, right? We get to see
yeah.
you got to be a part of watching Usain Bolt in person,
Hmm.
go through all these gold medals as a sprinter and be such a decorated athlete. Just the Michael Phelps. I don't know if you were ever had a chance to go to the pool and go watch any of those types of things and that, but it's just an amazing thing to see the era we went through of some athletes and how they were able to consistently push themselves over like 3 Olympics. And for
Yeah.
you being through that experience, you can really contest to how challenging it is that if you set a goal and you achieve it, to now go, what now? Well, what is my next goal? Do I want to push myself more to try and beat the next generation that's coming up that's going to compete against me when I'm 30? Right. But you did. You kept trying, you kept pushing. Did you keep the same focus to like, I just want to do worlds and like another championship? I can't be doing all these diamond elite. Did you change that schedule or did you stick pretty much to that?
To be honest, I didn't make it very far into my 2017 season before getting injured,
Mm.
um, and so ended up having to pull out of pretty much all the diamond leagues I had in the schedule, in hopes that I would be able to recover in time to go to Worlds. And
Yeah.
so um, we had all these plans, and then injuries kind of took over, and so uh, I never really had to deal with what a season is like as a defending Olympic champion. In all honesty,
Yeah.
obviously it's not a good thing to have happen, but at that point, I kind of just had a series of injuries where the goal shifted, and it was now like, okay, I need to get healthy enough just to get back out there, and then we can
Yeah.
start evaluating and then start talking about winning worlds again and winning these diamond league meets. But right now, the goal is just get yourself healthy enough to get back out there, and unfortunately, that never really came to fruition.
Yeah, but you did try to keep pursuing to the 2020 Olympics, right? Because I remember seeing along your path, you did you catch COVID at one point?
No, I went over to compete in Europe in 2021,
Yeah.
like when the Olympics were postponed, and
Yep.
then when athletes were coming back, it was kind of like hit or miss with what like border crossing you went to and what
Oh,
nation
and
you got.
quarantines.
Some people were given exemptions from quarantine, knowing that
Okay.
they were going to Olympic trials, and I, pled my case and was given no exemption. So leading into our Olympic trials, I quarantined for 2 weeks, like in my parents' basement.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I remember
just
seeing back in the day you're on the rower and doing some
yeah,
workouts and stuff like that. Yeah. You're trying to make the best of it, right? Like doing what you can,
yeah,
keeping your sanity at that time. And the world was really a chaotic place. No one knew what was going on. But all we can
exactly.
all see now, after in hindsight, that it was something else going on. But that is what it is. But as well, I remember that 2020/2021 games, and I was really looking forward to seeing you jump because I was like, oh, I want to see Derek, I see what he's going to be able to do this time around, being that now you're obviously in your 30s. And wasn't that the year that they had a tie for first and they both took a gold medal? I remember watching that. It was the guy from Greece and the guy from Qatar, correct? I
Italy,
can't remember their names.
Italy and Qatar. Yeah,
Oh, Italy and Qatar, sorry.
yeah.
And they jumped the same height and they had the same amount of misses. And they pretty much were like, do you want to continue on or do you want to just split it? And I think for a lot of people, there was some discussion about, do we let them split this or do we see who comes out first? What's your opinion on that being that's your event?
So it's funny, they had just recently changed that rule.
Hmm.
that you were able to tie. And so I think it was like maybe the World Indoor Championships that year, or like one of the very recent World Indoor Championships. It happened in the women's event, and they decided to tie. And to me, I was like, why wouldn't you? Like, if one, like, they made a big story about the Tokyo tie because those two guys are like very good friends. They were like both at each other's weddings, and so for them
Hmm.
it made a lot of sense. But also, right now you have a gold medal. Why would you risk that to do a jump off only where only one of you is going to end up with the gold medal?
Yeah,
And like,
yeah,
if you tied, no one's going to be like, "Oh, you won the gold medal in Tokyo, but was it a tie or did you win on your own?" No one's going to ask. You know what I mean?
no,
So like,
yeah,
for me, it was a no-brainer,
yeah,
especially if you're friends with the guy.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
so everyone, like, I think it won like a sportsmanship award, and everyone was like commending them for like being such good sports. But I was like, it really,
It's logical.
yeah, it was the logical
Like, who
decision.
wouldn't want to take a gold medal? If you told
Right.
me I'm getting a gold, I will split it with you any day.
Would you rather a 100% chance of walking away with a gold medal or a 50% chance?
Take your odds.
So that, I mean, yeah, that's how I saw it. I had actually been in only a few situations where I had to do a jump off in my entire career. Two of them were actually with teammates. One of them was in high school with a St. Pat's teammate, and
Hmm.
then another was at Pan Am Games with a Canadian teammate. And both times I asked them, like, "Would you like to tie?" And both times they said no, and I was like, "Okay, well, we'll keep trying." And then actually at my World Championships in 2015, we had to have a jump off as well. And at that time, it literally didn't even cross my mind because I was like,
Hmm.
I don't know. It just isn't something that you think about. And I was so in the zone that I was like, no, I think I could win. Like,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
so I can see it going either way. It made sense for those guys to just,
Yeah. I was actually like really happy with the situation and how it turned out because they're both working so hard, 4 years put in to be able to come there and then have a buddy as well that you compete against that you can share this with. Like, why wouldn't you?
yeah,
Right. So I thought that was a really good thing on them to do that. And it made a difference in the sport and around the world in sporting to see that we're here to compete, but we're also here to be great sportsmen, like have great sportsmanship
yeah.
and be great sports in order to just embrace the experience and make the most of whatever comes. Because why would you take the chance of 50% winning when you can get a 100% chance to have a gold? Split it or not, it's a gold medal. And for you, was that your last time really pursuing trying to stay at the professional level and, having any more hope of the Diamond League or anything after that?
Yeah, I had pretty early on said that I wanted to compete until I was 30, and that meant the 2020 Olympics. And so even the fact that it was postponed a year, sort of like I had to, reevaluate plans. And so obviously I would have loved to have been in Tokyo. It didn't work out that way. But ultimately that would have been, I think, the end of my career either way.
Yeah, that would have been the closing of the curtain and definitely still a great career. Like, yeah, you had some injuries along the way. Like, you can't really plan for that or how you're going to handle it. You're just making the best of it. And I would say coming out an Olympic champion and then now another silver medal, technically,
Mhm.
on in the bag is such a cool accolade to have. And the achievements you've pursued and been able to accomplish, it's really amazing and a privilege to one be able to chat with you today and just to pick your mind and hear about your athletic journey experiences, but then to see that, hey, we have to transition back into normal life. You mentioned you're going back to school now, you're working on getting your graduate degree, moving into that field. So I'm wishing you continued success in all your endeavors, whatever you're driving into, whatever your next steps are, so that you can take all these experiences and just put it into the next step. So I truly appreciate you taking the time to tune in for this episode and share all your wisdom and your great mindset that you've developed naturally. And of course, the situations along the way helped you foster that and build it into what you've become now. And an example for myself, but as well athletes that are younger and coming through the ranks on how to approach these situations, how to deal with the adversity, how to have balance in life, and how to just enjoy the process, enjoy the journey. Because one day we do have to hang it up, right? And we don't think about it at the beginning or even during. It's when it hits after, and all of a sudden you have all this time, and you're like, well, what do I do now? You know?
Right.
So I appreciate you sharing all that insight and being open and honest with the mistakes you've made and how you corrected, and just enjoying that whole journey. So I'm wishing all the best for you, and I'm looking forward to crossing paths again. Maybe just not at the grocery store or something like that. But I am very appreciative of how the universe worked out and aligning us for this chat. So hope all the best, man, and have a great day as well.